everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Issue by Issue Crisis. The new-ish, this will be the third episode of our second podcast, companion podcast, I don't know what you want to call it, twin podcast, twin journey through time, through DC Comics history, starting from Crisis on Infinite Earths #1. And we're in the third episode. We're going to read some interesting comics this week. All about the big, members of the Big Seven. We've got Wonder Woman number 324. We're going to briefly summarize Amethyst number 4. Obviously, Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, is not part of the Big Seven. That would make that book a lot weirder, or that iteration of the Justice League a lot weirder. But I'll talk about that when we get to Amethyst number 4, Batman number 382, and Flash number 344. And this is a different Flash than listeners of the Golden Age issue by issue will have heard about. So that'll be exciting. But let's first set the scene. Last episode of Issue by Issue Crisis, we didn't have any real world history because all of the issues covered were still being published on January 3rd, so the history from the first episode of Issue by Issue Crisis still works for the second episode. But this episode, we have some issues published on January 10th, so about a week later than the previous issues. So let's talk about the history that was happening up to that date. So let's get into that. January 7th, 1985, film star Yul Brynner, probably best well known for playing the King of Siam in the King and I, and also if you're Christian in the Ten Commandments, if you watch that every Easter, or the Magnificent Seven, or the original Westworld from 1973. He was suffering from terminal lung cancer. He appeared on the U.S. television program Good Morning America and vowed to make a public service announcement to deter others from smoking, because smoking is bad, kids. So don't do it. January 8th, 1985, Mary Lou Retton, who is actually in the news at this moment due to some sickness, American gymnast who won the hearts of the U.S. at the 1984 Summer Olympics, is named the Associate Press Female Athlete of the Year. So that's exciting for her. And finally, January 10th, 1985, Sandinista Daniel Ortega becomes president of Nicaragua and vows to continue the transformation towards socialism and ally the country with the Soviet Union and Cuba. American policy continues to support the Contras in their revolt against the Nicaraguan government. Now, this will eventually lead to the Iran-Contra affair, dealing with Oliver North and Ronald Reagan and selling weapons illegally, all that kind of stuff. But we'll deal with that when it comes up in about 8 months real-world time, when we're in August of 1985. But that's some of the big headlines that are happening during the time that these issues are being released, being published, put on newsstands. So let's get into the actual issues. And we're going to start with Wonder Woman number 324, released January 3rd, 1985, with a cover date of April 1985. Like all issues in this series are going to have, they're going to have a lot of debuts to the podcast, but not necessarily characters who are debuting for the first time in these issues. So let's talk about a few here. Obviously, we've met Wonder Woman. We met her last episode when she was in the Justice League of America title alongside Superman and Barry Allen the Flash. But we've also got introduced in this issue of Wonder Woman Atomic Knight, otherwise known as Gardner Grail. He is a man with Cassandra-like premonition abilities, Cassandra being the figure from Greek mythology who can see the future but have nobody believe her and her predictions. Gardner Grail, and he'll explain a little bit of his backstory in this issue, has premonition abilities, but they're only about events that will cause the world to fall into nuclear catastrophe, nuclear winter, all this kind of stuff, anything to do with nuclear energy. It's 1985. Nuclear energy is a really big deal. The Chernobyl disaster hasn't happened yet. It's about still a year and a half off, so there's not that sort of fear around nuclear energy that there will be post Chernobyl disaster. So that's kind of the reason why his whole shtick is his whole shtick, you know. Also debuting for the first time on the podcast is Steve Trevor, companion, lover, partner of Wonder Woman. He debuted in the exact same issue as she did back in 1941, which is, you know, it's weird. We were meeting Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor here in the Crisis show rather than in the Golden Age because we haven't gotten to 1941 yet. But he debuts in this one. He's always a very important part to Wonder Woman's stories, at least up until, like, in the New 52, they, you know, their relationship's all weird. But we'll get to that eventually in, 40 years or whatever. We also have Etta Candy. She makes a short little cameo. She's taking a little sleep. She's also a companion to Wonder Woman, more of like a sort of sidekick, but not a sidekick that, dons a costume like Robin. But more of just like a friend and companion. And we also meet Hippolyta briefly, on Paradise Island, which is where Wonder Woman is from originally. She is Wonder Woman's mother and the leader of Paradise Island. So let's talk about the issue itself. It was written by Dan Mishkin, drawn by Don Heck, lettered by Ben Oda, and colored by Nancy Houlihan. So let's get into the issue. So the cover is great, I think. It has a very, very detailed drawing of the new Atomic Knight. Now, this is still... Gardner Grail was also the original Atomic Knight, but he has new armor in this one. Something happened to his old armor. Now he's got new stuff that he has stolen from Star Labs. We've got Wonder Woman there, and it says... You've seen him here first, the new Atomic Knight. Only Wonder Woman defies his very first mission. And of course, this is a self-appointed mission. He is not a part of any sort of organization. He's a solo agent. The issue starts out with a huge explosion. And it just says, again, the frozen earth is sundered. The tundra heaves just as it did 3/4 of a century ago. But now its repercussions will be felt. Now, that is something that will come back later, that information. I was very confused when I first read it. I was like, weird. I didn't know if it was stuff that you needed to know from previous issues, but it's not. So, or I guess it only somewhat is. And next is some information that you do need to know about previous issues to know about, and I'll explain it. So a young girl, is banging at this door, and the door opens, and a middle-aged woman, a mother figure, opens the door, and this young woman who is named Michelle, she is, kind of ranting and raving about, something happened to Eloise and Mark and everybody, and they're all gone. And we learned that Eloise is the daughter to this woman, Lisa Abernathy. Lisa Abernathy is a political reporter on GBS, which is Galaxy Broadcasting, and then the S, I don't know what it stands for, but it's the company that at this point in time has bought the Daily Planet and made Clark Kent a news reporter on the air, like an anchor, not a newspaper man. So back to the story. And I'm very confused about this. This is something that occurred at the end of last issue, these children disappearing. It was like at the very end. It didn't really have anything to do with the story. It has something to do with this little alien gremlin guy who has been hanging out with Steve Trevor for about 10 issues. And we'll figure out what that is later in the issue. Wonder Woman, Diana Prince, overhears this, and she deduces that it has something to do with the little alien that Steve Trevor is hanging out with, who is being called Glitch. Diana Prince transforms into Wonder Woman and runs through Etta Candy's room. They all live in this house together, or near, like, our neighbors. Or the living situation is important. Etta Candy is sleeping, and that's the only part it plays in this issue. She's sleeping, and Wonder Woman uses her window to leave the house. Wonder Woman then flies. She would use her plane, although I don't know why, because she's only flying to a different part of town. But she mentions that Steve has used the robot plane. So he's using it right now. She then goes downtown to where the kids were hanging out. And she finds this sort of invisible field accidentally, because a dog jumps through it and disappears. And then Wonder Woman grabs his leash and pulls him back out. And she realizes that it's a sort of echo, a teleportation echo from the teleportation beam used by whoever, teleported these kids away and Glitch, the alien. And she, gives the dog back to his owner, and she says, you should probably call the cops and have them cordon off this area. This seems dangerous for the people to just be going through teleportation echoes. And so she widens it by using her strength, because it's, closing, because it's an echo, so eventually it will fade. And she walks through, and she's suddenly transported to high up in the air above the Arctic. And she realizes, yes, that teleportation effect came from a spacecraft, but instead of taking it to where the ship is, it took it to where the teleportation happened. So she is high above the Arctic Circle, so she's flying, doing Wonder Woman things, and she actually sees Steve in her robot plane. And I don't know if it's called a robot plane because it can talk, because it can, but I always thought it was an invisible jet, because in the last issue of Justice League of America, she was flying in an invisible jet. You just see the Flash and her sitting there. But I guess maybe she's got multiple, Maybe she's got more than one plane. One's invisible and one's a robot. So we see into the plane, and Steve Trevor's in there, and he's flying it, and he's talking to the plane, and he's being chased by two Russian fighter jets, and they are using a new type of technology where instead of being able to locate planes on radar, stuff like that, because the robot plane is invisible to detection, they are focusing on the slipstream caused by air travel. So it's a very fun, and I don't know if possible technology, but that's fun. So he's worried because they're going to shoot missiles at him. They have shot missiles at him, and there's no way he's going to be able to outrun these missiles because they are locked in on his slipstream. So he'll never be able to get away. When he actually says, unless I've got a guardian angel looking out for me, and then ... he's probably going to say a swear or something. But a giant snowball is thrown through the air, and it kind of takes the attention of the missiles away from the robot plane, because it flies through his slipstream. So it has its own slipstream because it's flying through the air, and then the missiles go after it. And he sees that it's Wonder Woman. He's very excited. He lands the plane, and they talk. Wonder Woman's wondering why he's in Soviet airspace. Why is she in Soviet airspace too? And he talks about the giant explosion that we saw at the beginning of the issue. And they talk about something called the Tunguska blast of 1908, and I looked it up, and it's an actual event that happened in 1908 in the Tunguska region of Russia. And it happened randomly on June 30th, 1908, and it is a blast released enough energy to kill reindeer and flatten an estimated 80 million trees over an area of 830 square miles. Witnesses reported seeing a fireball, a bluish light, nearly as bright as the sun, moving across the sky. So it's hypothesized that it's a spacecraft crashing to the Earth, and that's also what Steve Trevor says here. But if you think about it, 1908, there's nothing that could be that powerful at that point. It's really weird, and who knows what's up with that. But they put it together that it's clearly the Gremlins, who are the race of aliens that glitch this little guy. It's very silly. I just don't think that Wonder Woman should deal with space. It just feels like it clashes so much with her sort of theme, aesthetic, genre, It just feels weird. I mean, I guess maybe you think about it as her being a person of antiquity, maybe, and it's conflict with the future, but I don't know. I just think aliens just really aren't her thing. It's like when Batman deals with aliens. We don't need it. We then cut to Gardner Grail, the Atomic Knight, talking about his new his new armor and his mission to stop a conflict over, coincidentally, for this issue, at the place of the explosion that we were just talking about. That choices made and things done there will cause the start of World War III. Not a great thing for anyone involved. On his way there, he is tormented by Cassandra, the woman from Greek myth, who, during the siege of Troy, gained the ability to see the future, but no one believes her. That's her whole thing. And he says that only the Atomic Knight can save the world. We then have a sort of little interstitial scene with two military types at the Pentagon, and Lisa Abernathy comes with Senator Covington, who's we've never met before, and I don't know how important he is to the story, where it's revealed that Lisa's child and her friends were sort of kidnapped or vanished while being in contact with a small little alien creature, Glitch, who has been a companion of Steve Trevor, Colonel Trevor, who is under the supervision of this general. That's all for this interstitial. Lisa Abernathy leaves with her head down, sad that her daughter's been taken. We go back to Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor. They're now in the robot plane, and they're flying towards the explosion site. And as they're on their way there, they are hit with a sort of stasis field by the Atomic Knight, because he knows that they're involved through his premonitions with the events that cause the catastrophe, the World War III nuclear winter, the end of humanity as we know it. He's holding them in a stasis field. Wonder Woman, she opens up the lid, the glass, I don't know what it's called on a fighter jet, like the windshield, the windscreen on the robot plane, and using her Amazon bracelets and her strength, she sort of absorbs the stasis field energy coming out of the Atomic Knight's armor and shoots it back at him. He sort of is pushed back, but his stabilizers kick in, keeping him in the air. He is then tormented again by Cassandra. They're like, why would anyone believe you, Gardner Grail? Why would believe your second sight is real? Only people who have it themselves will believe you. And we then see Wonder Woman. She's like, wait a minute, Steve, I know that woman. And Steve's like, what woman? All I see is that oddball having a conversation with the air. And Wonder Woman's like, but can't you, what? Then suddenly a piercing wail fills the air. And I'm not sure, it's not really explained if that's from the Atomic Knight or if it's from something else. I think it has to be from the Atomic Knight, because then in the next panel he is swooping down to, kind of maybe knock out Wonder Woman, make sure that she doesn't do whatever she's going to do to cause catastrophe. She sort of rolls onto her back and kicks him with 2 feet, and then instructs her robot plane to sort of do a barrel roll and bat him away with one of the wings. It's pretty cool. And he lands, he's going to land very fast into the ground. Wonder Woman, not knowing if his armor can protect him from such a thing, catches him and lays him on the ground. He's knocked out from the wing, and they then cut to a little bit later when he is waking up. And basically he explains to Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor that he has the gift of prophecy. He has the second sight. He has premonitions, predictions about things that no one would believe. And then, Wonder Woman says, oh, that's the woman you were talking to, Cassandra, from Greek, from ancient times, she says, because she's a real person in this world. I was about to say Greek mythology, but that Wonder Woman is technically connected to Greek mythology, so it's real stuff. Gardner Grail then explains sort of his whole deal. He explains that he was a guinea pig for a computer simulation experiment to test how well soldiers would function after an atomic holocaust. There is a little asterisk to tell you what it's referencing. It is referencing the issue DC Comics Presents number 57, which is where Gardner Grail debuts. He then explains that the whole thing went wrong and he was trapped in this sort of heroic fantasy leading a band of atomic knights. And after he was freed, his brain, with this long interaction with the computer, got predictive capability. So it's not really sort of that he gets prophecies, but he can sort of see predictive models, that they do with computers, and can predict what actions will chain react into other things. There's also another asterisk here for when he's talking about a band of atomic knights. It is referencing Strange Adventures, which is a series of comics that was started in 1950 and went until 1973. It had things like Adam Strange and the Atomic Knights and stuff of a science fiction sort of bent to it. Suddenly, they are cut off from hearing the rest of Gardner Grail's story when a group of Soviet soldiers parachute in from a plane up in the sky. And Steve Trevor makes a very funny joke. He says, "Hey, I'd love to hear the rest of this, but I'm afraid I've got a prediction of my own. Our geese are about to be cooked." Get it? He's been predicting, even though it's like, well, that's obvious. Then we cut to more than 20,000 miles straight up in a spaceship, where we see the group of children who have been sort of teleported away from Earth, and the little gremlin Glitch. He looks a lot like Brainiac 5 from the Legion of Superheroes. He is a green alien wearing a sort of purplish, pinkish pantsuit sort of situation, and he's got blonde hair, which is like, that's Brainiac 5 if I've ever seen a Brainiac 5 before. And he is talking to, behind bars, they're all caged, these three children and Glitch are caged, and he's talking to these sort of bigger humanoid looking aliens. And the first one he's talking to looks like he raided Big Barda's closet and is wearing her whole thing, which is funny because Big Barda debuted about 14-ish years before this, so like she's a thing that is around the DC universe, and it's crazy how much these aliens look like they're wearing, like Fourth World Big Barda uniforms or outfits. It's very funny. And basically, these big aliens are mad at Glitch for stealing their Star Cruiser. Glitch and his people stole it. We learned that Glitch's people are sort of like a slave class in this society who are like technical people. They do like the nitty-gritty piloting, repair, stuff like that. And Glitch makes up a story about how he was frozen in a block of ice for many years, and he just melted, so he doesn't know where everybody else went, all these other gremlins. And he asks, are any on board? And they say no. They rebelled against these bigger aliens, and they left for a world that we have not yet located. Glitch then says, "Oh no, that's terrible. After all the things that you've done for my people." And he asks, like, "Oh, you came all this way for just one crashed cruiser?" Because they must be from very many light years away or whatever. And it's no, they came for the device that the Star Cruiser had on it, which is the phlogiston bomb. The phlogiston bomb, says Glitch with shock. He doesn't explain what that is, but he says that him and his three companions would be able to help out because they're qualified technical support, since there's no gremlins on board, and to do the technical work, and that's a sort of way for them to get out. I should mention that throughout this conversation, instead of saying things like gremlin or this race of bigger aliens, they have been saying their names, but it just seems like someone took maybe their cat and had it walk across the keyboard. And it's like, that's what our alien race shall be called. It's like Itterflurks is one, and what's the other one? Yeah, and the word for the gremlin race is Yifgsftgifedas. Like, what is that? That's nothing. That's just your cat walked across the keyboard, and you're like, that looks great. It looks like aliens. But back to it. So he has volunteered himself and his three child companions to be the technical support as a way to get out of this cage. And that's all we'll see of them this issue. Thank goodness. We then cut to Paradise Island, where we learn that the purple ray went wild. The purple ray is a ray that heals the Amazons. And Paradise Island was kind of destroyed a bit, like all the buildings and stuff were destroyed in the process. And Paula and Sophia, two Amazons, have come to Hippolyta to tell her that the work is proceeding quickly, and Paradise Island will be just as it was. And Sophia, tells Paula, hey, she wants to be left alone right now. She's like sad or whatever. And Hippolyta says to Sophia after Paula has left that the buildings may be just as they once were, but I doubt that Paradise Island will ever be the same after what I have done to Diana and what she did to me in kind. And this is stuff that happened in previous issues in like 322 and previous. And that's all that little sort of interstitial scene is just telling us that Hippolyta and Wonder Woman have hurt each other badly, which happens between a mother and a daughter sometimes, But we then cut back to Wonder Woman, Steve Trevor, and the Atomic Knight, and they're surrounded by Russian military. And they're like, hey, you American pigs, what are you doing in our country? We're gonna seize you and capture you because you're in our territory and you're not allowed to be. And we see that the Atomic Knight gets a premonition that there's two futures that are more likely than others, and they both have to deal with Steve Trevor being killed in the near future, like from this exchange between the Russian soldiers and these three people, Wonder Woman, Atomic Knight, and Steve Trevor. And so in one, it looks like Steve Trevor is killed. Russian planes then fly over the Pentagon, and the president, who is Ronald Reagan, presses the button in the nuclear football to send off a atomic warhead. There's another one that looks like Wonder Woman gets so angry because of Steve's death that she flies her robot plane and attacks Russians, and then the leader of the USSR uses their nuclear football to send out a nuclear strike. So either way, a nuclear strike will happen, which will then lead to mutually assured destruction by the other group sending out their own, and then we get nuclear winter, death of humanity, or the vast majority of humanity, and a bad time for everyone involved. So after seeing this, Atomic Knight jumps and sort of like pushes Steve Trevor to the ground out of any possible bullet fire, and then jumps up into the air, or flies up into the air, I should say, to get the attention of the Russians. It's working. He shoots them, or he shoots the ice with one of his atomic rays, which sort of melts the ice. So it's getting, and they're in the Arctic, so probably not a lot of land under there, if any. Although this is Russia, so there probably is land underneath, but the ice and snow is very thick, so you melt some of it, you start to sink in. The Russians start to shoot at Atomic Knight, and then Atomic Knight uses a freeze ray that he has just revealed that he has to freeze the feet of these Russian soldiers into the snow and ice, possibly forcing them later on to have their feet amputated due to severe frostbite. So that's not great for them. Steve Trevor then gets in on the fight because even though this Atomic Knight is a loon, a certifiable loon, he's their loon, so he's got to protect them. Wonder Woman doesn't want to fight. She's being very non-aggressive. She's only dodging, or not dodging. Well, yeah, I guess she is dodging and blocking bullets with her bracelets, and sort of non-lethally, dealing with these soldiers. Steve gets behind their commander and has a gun, held to him, arm around the neck, and then a gun to the head as a sort of like, hey, I've got you as a hostage. And this Russian soldiers are sort of at a standstill, but Atomic Knight is still worried that Trevor is still in the line of fire, and he's got to get out of here because his life is, the linchpin in the sort of future events that cause nuclear catastrophe. So he is rushing towards him to grab him Wonder Woman lassos Atomic Knight's arm away and throws him to the ground. And she says, I can't rely on Prophet's Knight. I have to do what my conscience dictates, which means like, hey, we got to stop attacking each other. Steve makes a quip about how the whole world isn't like Paradise Island. He's a soldier, and these are his enemies in a Cold War, so really shouldn't be doing such aggressive, hot actions. But he listens to Wonder Woman. He says, it's not a bad idea, I guess, to show a little faith sometimes. Immediately upon being released, the commander of this sort of brigade says, seize him. And so the Russian soldiers grab Steve Trevor, and they're going to kill him. And Wonder Woman says, stop, you can't. But before they can, first Atomic Knight thinks, but they will. Steve Trevor will die, and then there will be no stopping the events that I've predicted. He sort of trails off because at that moment, in the sky above them appears the spaceship with the unpronounceable aliens inside. And it announces, surrender all forces. This area is under the dominion of the Itterflirk Armada. Your world will shortly be in our complete control, and following our mission here, it will be destroyed. So that's the end of that issue. It says a little blurb at the end. It says, next, a very strong likelihood of the end of the world in an adventure that includes the amazing Amazon, the Atomic Knight, the Russians, the aliens, and the Gremlin from the Kremlin, which is just a fun little rhyme there. And it also makes me think that they're calling him a gremlin so that they could eventually make that sort of joke of a gremlin in the Kremlin. So that's a thing that has happened. But yeah, that's the Wonder Woman issue. It'll be nice when we get past this silly alien stuff, and we can just deal with, I don't know, Cheetah. I feel like Cheetah's a good foil for Wonder Woman, but we'll get there. We'll get there in a while. I guess we gotta wait for Wonder Woman 325 to come up, and luckily Wonder Woman. This is just a little preview. Wonder Woman is one of the first series to reboot after the Crisis on Infinite Earths storyline, concludes, because I think I said in the first issue or the first episode of this podcast that the Crisis on Infinite Earths reboot is a rolling reboot. It's not like a hard, everyone starts, on the same day. Over time they all reboot over the course of a couple 3 years. But Wonder Woman, I believe, is one of the first ones to reboot. So that'll be, we'll get through this and then we'll start from the beginning again. So that'll be interesting. But let's move on to Amethyst number 4. Now, Amethyst number 4, we'll go through all this stuff. Amethyst number 4, it was released January 10th, 1985, with a cover date of April 1985. Debuting on the podcast is Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld. She is the Princess of Gemworld, another reality outside of the standard, DC universe that we think of as like Earth 1 or Earth 2 kind of situation. But she is, I don't want to say unimportant, but she is just so sporadically introduced into the fiction. Like this Amethyst series only goes about 12 issues, and then it's done. Likely due to Crisis on Infinite Earths sort of resetting everything. And then she doesn't really get another actual ongoing series, basically until ever. She never gets one. All the rest of them are limited series of like 4 issues or 6 issues or these really short things. Or like she took over the Sword of Sorcery title during the New 52 for like I think maybe only a handful of issues, maybe I think more than 10, but not a lot. And she's just not very involved with things. That's changed in the recent years. She was a part of Young Justice. She had another limited series run. But at this point, she's not really, really important. So I'm just going to, comment that she had an issue coming out, and we'll talk about the who wrote the issue and all that kind of stuff. But it just doesn't feel like a good use of our time, since we have so many issues to go through, to be focusing, the 20 or so minutes that typically takes us to go through one of these more modern comics on something that is so unconsequential to the DC universe as a whole, So this issue was written by Dan Mishkin and Gary Cohn, penciled by Kurt Schaffenberger, inked by Romeo Tangle, lettered by John Costanza, and colored by Carl Gafford. So that's all we're going to say about Amethyst number 4. Sorry, all the Amethyst fans. I just don't see the point, I guess. Next up is going to be Batman number 382, released January 10th, number 1985. Cover date April 1985. So we have some debuts to the podcast, obviously. These are not their actual debuts. We have Robin, which, I know what you're saying, Nick. Robin debuted in episode 9 of Crisis on Infinite Earths Golden Age. This is clearly not the first time he's been on the podcast. Well, you're right about that. You are right about that, but that's not this Robin. This is not Dick Grayson Robin. This is Robin Jason Todd, because if you remember from last episode of Issue by Issue Crisis, Robin is now Nightwing, or Dick Grayson is now Nightwing, so new Robin happens, and that is Jason Todd. A controversial figure, certainly, in DC Comics. You either love him or hate him, I guess. We also have Catwoman, which is such a, not poor timing, but just a poor coincidence that on the episode of Issue by Issue, I'm pretty sure that comes out after this episode of Issue by Issue Crisis, Catwoman will debut legitimately. The Golden Age era Catwoman will debut, but she'll make her debut on the podcast for the first time here in Batman 382. And then we also have Vicky Vale, who's a reporter and love interest at times to Bruce Wayne Batman. This issue of Batman was written by Steve Mitchell, penciled by Rick Hoberg, inked by Rudy D. Nebrez, and lettered by Ben Oda, and colored by Adrian Roy or Waugh, if they're French or French-Canadian. So let's get into it. And first thing that we need to do before getting into it is to talk about the cover. It's got Batman, it's separated, so it's Bat, space, man, and it's got the bat symbol with Batman's head in there. He's kind of sort of like a Batman-Bat hybrid thing. It looks very weird, which I will say a lot about this art in this one. I don't know if it's just a weird scan that they have on DC Universe or what, but a lot of the art looks pretty bad. So that's unfortunate. The cover itself is weird because it has nothing to do with the actual story. It says, "In Search of Catwoman," and it has a giant Batman sort of looming down and reaching his hand out at these what look like regular citizens running away. There's fire in the background. One of the citizens is trying to shoot Batman. It could be a metaphor, but having read the story, I don't really see how it is. But we'll just leave it at that because the important stuff's on the inside. That's what they always say. And this is a sort of weird situation. This comic, or this issue, starts with a prologue. And it says, "The night began with a Black Panther on the prowl," which is a weird way to start. So there is a Black Panther, and it savagely attacks and kills a mugger and his victim. Because wild animals, they don't discern right from wrong, criminal from innocent. They'll just kill whoever they feel like. We then cut to Batman and Robin. They're in the Batmobile. And I will say that this is I didn't realize that the older sort of Batman 66 style, double sort of rounded windshield thing lasted so long into the 80s, but I guess it's not really Batman 1966. It's just not what I would think of as the Batmobile. It kind of looks very 80s, I will say that. It looks like, I guess I'd probably equate it to maybe an older style of vehicle from the 80s, like maybe an 80s Mustang sort of front. It looks weird. It doesn't look like a Batmobile to me, which is fair because I haven't read a lot of comics from the 80s. So that's fair. Batman and Robin, who is Jason Todd, not Dick Grayson, they have been brought to a hostage situation. A villain known as Darkwolf. He has taken 6 hostages in the Egyptian embassy in Gotham, and he is calling for the release of Syrian prisoners from Egyptian prisons. Egypt has refused. They are probably people that work inside the embassy, so they're likely Egyptian citizens, but I guess if I was a country, I don't know. You're not supposed to, negotiate with terrorists. That's always the thing, but, I mean, they're your citizens, so... But Batman and Robin deal with this hostage situation sort of in a truncated form. We see Robin rescuing the hostages. We don't see how he did it. And we see Batman battling Darkwolf. But Darkwolf gets a grenade off and blows up the building, or the floor that they're on. And Darkwolf escapes on a sort of paraglider. Hang glider, and glides away. He later thinks that he's killed Batman, but I mean, Batman, if Darkwolf would have just turned around, he would have seen Batman alive. We then cut to, at that same moment, reporter Julia Remark. Oh, that's funny. And photographer Vicky Vale. So when I said that Vicky Vale was a reporter, that was only. She's a reporter in later instances, but I guess right now she is a photographer. So that's on me. That's my bad. So they're on the hunt for this panther because it's going to be a good story. That's weird. What a weird thing to happen. A panther just running around Gotham City. It's weird. They find the panther and are, holding up a stick to defend themselves from it when a cat of 9 tails, or a whip as we know it, grabs onto the big stick that they're holding and wrenches it out of their hands. And who do we know that uses a whip? Well, if you've only listened to this podcast and know nothing about DC Comics, you don't know a single person, because she hasn't been introduced yet in issue by issue Golden Age. But it's Catwoman. Catwoman typically uses a whip as a weapon, and this is no different. Now, we then get a page of sort of the title page with all of the, writing credits and drawing credits, all the credits for the creators. And it's like a big page, single page panel of Catwoman. And man, is this a goofy costume. Like, I know from the first appearance of Catwoman, which you'll learn about, next week on the main show, is basically just a dress, I think. And this is not far off. I will say it shows a lot more leg than a standard dress, because it's sort of it's a purple sort of unitard with long sleeves, and the bottom is it's like a briefs sort of cut, but there's like a skirt on the front and the back, but not on the sides. And she's of course got a cat sort of headdress, a cat cowl, and a green cape. I think the cape is goofy. I don't think she needs a cape, but she has one. It's a real goofy costume just in general. Oh, and then she's of course got calf-high boots. So, not of course. I mean, why would you think of course? Of course, she's got to have calf-high boots. No, but she has calf-high boots that I guess are supposed to be black, and she has black hair, a lot of black hair on her head. They both shriek. The two reporters shriek, say, "Catwoman!" No, because she's like a criminal. And Catwoman says, "I should have known it would be you, Vicky Vale. After our last encounter, you know what I can do, so I advise you to listen to my next words very carefully." We learn a little bit later in this issue from an editor's note that they last sort of crossed paths in Batman 355, which is, almost 30 issues before this. So it's been quite a while, like over 2 years. So that's cool. Catwoman said to, heed her next words carefully, but then she doesn't really say anything. She just leaps over the two reporters and to the panther that has been in the sidelines, not doing anything. And we learn that it is Catwoman's pet panther, Diablo, who had escaped from her apartment, which is not proper housing for a panther, if you know anything about cats. but Catwoman's presence calms Diablo down into a little harmless kitty cat. Meow, meow, meow. Catwoman is about to take her panther and continue what she calls a larger hunt. Their larger hunt that they're working towards together. When Vicky Vale, says, "You have to tell us what's going on, for the paper," and Catwoman says, "Unhand me, woman," and raises her whip to lash out at Vicky Vale when a batarang hits it out of her hand. Batman has arrived on the scene, which is when we learn that they last crossed paths, Vicky Vale and Batman and Catwoman in 355 from editor Len Wein. Catwoman and Batman get into sort of a small scuffle. And when Vicky Vale, stops and says, "Stop it, Batman. She wasn't trying to hurt us. She was just looking after her panther, looking for and protecting her panther," and says that it's been injured. And Robin says, "Yeah, this cat doesn't seem very feisty. Way more, slow than the ones I've seen in the circus." Because at this point in time, Jason Todd was given basically the exact same backstory as Dick Grayson. Which is bad writing. So Catwoman reveals that her panther has been poisoned by who else? Darkwolf. So they are connected. She then tells the story of why Darkwolf would even want to poison her panther. She was living in Egypt for a while, and she happened to be there at the same time that the Egyptian president Sadat was sending peace overtures to Israel, saying, let's stop fighting, let's be friends. And a friend that she had made, an official with the Department of Antiquities, was concerned about the possible reprisals from less tolerant Arab factions. Syrian terrorists had already staged several strikes on Egypt. And intelligence had learned of a possible attack on the National Museum of Antiquities itself. And Catwoman loves antiquities and, rare things that are valuable. And the Syrian sort of terrorist that was tasked with, doing this strike on the museum was Darkwolf. Catwoman decided to do something about it because at this time she's sort of half criminal, half hero sometimes, depending on what's going on. Just like in regular comics, just in modern comics. During her prevention of his attack on the museum, Diablo, the panther, mauled his face, which then had him donning this sort of wolf mask that he now wears to cover up the scars on his face. Before that, he was wearing a sort of the stereotypical sort of head wrap on top, head wrap over the mouths that you see in movies and other media of Arabic assassins or agents or, terrorists, stuff like that. So now he wears this sort of wolf mask to go along with his moniker Darkwolf. And then this Catwoman says something that's kind of weird, but also weirdly poignant to what's going on right now with Israel, which I'm not going to comment on because this is not a political news or discussion podcast, and it's a very, very complicated situation over there. But she says, since his wounds run far deeper than the skin, there are now 3 things he hates even more than Jews: Egypt, me, and Diablo the Panther. We then cut to Gotham International Airport, where we are at the security line, and a man is bypassing security, although a TSA agent is asking him to, stop and go through the metal detector like everyone else. He reveals under his coat is the costume of Darkwolf, and he, sort of shoots off some rounds in the airport and then flees out a gate that does not have a plane attached. He then rushes across the tarmac to a plane that is boarding. And it's fun. Like, you can see how much times have changed because these people are boarding just with the stairs up against the plane, not down any sort of jetway or anything like that. So it's kind of funny. So he hops up the stairs and onto the plane and takes the whole plane hostage, including the pilots and all the passengers and stuff like that. We then cut back to Crime Alley, where Catwoman and Batman and Robin and Vicky Vale and that other reporter whose name I forgot. Her last name was Remark, but it was spelled with a Q. And Catwoman tells the story of how Diablo got poisoned, and why Darkwolf is here in Gotham in the first place, why he attacked the Egyptian embassy in Gotham rather than in literally any other place, maybe closer to Egypt or in Egypt itself, you know? Prior to his attacking of the Egyptian embassy in Gotham, he went to Catwoman's apartment. How he knew where Catwoman's apartment was, stop asking so many questions. I can't tell you that because the writers also didn't tell me that. So I don't know. I'm sorry. But he breaks in, and Diablo apparently doesn't get free reign of the apartment while Catwoman is gone. He is on a chain leash, which is pretty uncool. Like, if you're going to keep a big jungle cat in your apartment, you should maybe not, chain it up. It seems a little bit uncool. Maybe that's the reason why you shouldn't be keeping exotic cats that are bigger than a man. He goes in to Catwoman's fridge and grabs some sort of vague meat out and sprinkles cyanide all over it. Catwoman hypothesizes from his suicide pill and feeds it to Diablo. Catwoman says that Darkwolf likely was hoping that Diablo would either die or, in its pain from the poison, attack Catwoman when she arrived back home. Diablo did neither. He broke through his chain through the sort of stress and pain of the poison and jumped out the window and then went on to attack that mugger and victim from the prologue. And Catwoman says, that's something that the cat will have to pay for. I mean, Batman says that's something that the cat will have to pay for, attacking those two people and killing them. And Robin says, I don't think so, Batman, because it looks like he's already died. And Catwoman's very sad. She picks up Diablo's big head and puts it against her head and cries tears. They then hear over the Batmobile's police radio that a plane has been taken hostage. The police radio doesn't say anything about who has taken the plane hostage and all of the people on board hostage, but it does say that it wants enough fuel to reach Damascus, Syria, so they put two and two together, that it must be Darkwolf. They, rush to the airport where Gordon is there. He's, first he's like, wait, Catwoman, like, she's wanted for crimes. And Batman's like, that'll have to wait, Jim Gordon. For whatever reason, we need Catwoman here. Which, I mean, I guess they do use her for the plan to get Darkwolf, so, but, I mean, it's not like Batman couldn't have figured out another way to do it without Catwoman, a known criminal. So they come up with this plan that they're going to radio to Darkwolf that he needs one more flight attendant to prevent panic among the hostages as a sort of, way of like, hey, we want everything to go smoothly here. Keeping the passengers calm will be beneficial, so take this another flight attendant. And he says, that's fine, but it has to be a woman, and there can only be one of them. And so, Selina Kyle, who is Catwoman's secret identity, don't tell anybody, she's a woman. So she dons a flight attendant's uniform and goes on the plane. She gets frisked down by Darkwolf. She has to restrain herself from just clawing his frickin' face off. And Batman sort of sneaks under the plane and onto the wing of the plane. And while Darkwolf is, busy with Selina Kyle, the flight attendant, Jim Gordon radios to the pilots that say that they need to fly low and at minimum speed to maintain altitude, not fall out of the sky, because Batman is going to be on the wing. And I mean, Batman's cool, but he can only hold on he can't hold on to a plane that's flying at regular cruising speed. Like, that's insane. Darkwolf comes back into the cockpit, and, why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long for this fuel? And the pilot's like, it always takes this long. Darkwolf is like, you're a liar. And he says, they're up to something. I'm going to learn what it is. So he's going to go outside. He's going to open the door and look outside. If he does that, though, he'll see Batman. So Robin rushes out of the control tower and down onto the tarmac. And Selina Kyle, as the flight attendant, says, look, someone's coming. And Darkwolf says, it's Batman's partner, Robin. So he must be trying to avenge Batman's death. I killed him earlier, remember? He didn't kill him. He didn't even check. Darkwolf then demands that the pilots take off. Robin has this sort of thing like, they're taking off, but it's taking too long. I gotta, sort of make it look like I'm running as fast as I can, but I'm not. So he does that, and the plane takes off, and he says, it's up to you and Catwoman now, Batman, or he thinks it. Batman is having a little bit of difficulty holding on, because, even at this minimum speed, it's still a lot. Selina Kyle, flight attendant, talks to the man next to the sort of emergency exit, not to give him the spiel about, hey, do you feel like you're of sufficient ability to be the exit row person, which I've never gotten to be. It's kind of a bummer because all that extra leg room. I've got these long dancer's legs and could really use that extra leg room, but I just don't want to pay for it because I'm poor. But he looks outside and sees Batman pointing to the emergency handle. So Selina Kyle asks him to, without saying anything, change his seat. But at just that moment, as this man is changing his seat, Darkwolf comes out of the cockpit and says, halt, right there. Don't make another move, guy who's changing seats. Why are you doing that? But as he's, gonna interrogate this passenger, Selina Kyle opens up the emergency door, which you're not supposed to do. It's illegal. You can get in a lot of trouble for doing that while the plane is in motion. And gets Batman inside and also jumps at Darkwolf with her. I guess she must just have really long fingernails because her fingers look like they end in claws. They don't look like very attractive hands. Not that I'm sort of a hand expert or anything like that, but they're drawn very hag-like she's an evil witch in a swamp or something. But she claws at Darkwolf's face, and Batman comes inside, and Darkwolf is shocked because he thought that Batman was dead because he doesn't check bodies for death. Batman and Darkwolf, they fight. They're fighting. There's a lot of fighting between Darkwolf and Batman. Batman seems to have gotten the upper hand, but Darkwolf, which I guess I haven't explained what Darkwolf looks like. He's got tan pants on, a red shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a bandolier basically of all grenades. So that must be his weapon of choice, because he's been using grenades like crazy. He pulls one off of his bandolier and pulls the pin. He's like, we're all going to die on this plane. But Catwoman, thinking back to her poor Diablo who died, the ferocity of this pain and this anguish, she jumps with such panther-like force and speed, grabs the grenade out of his hand and jumps. Well, not jumps out. I guess she doesn't jump out of the plane, but the wind from the emergency exit being open pulls her out with its force. And Batman yells, "Catwoman, no!" But she is already falling to her death. So Batman throws his parachute that he had, just in case he fell off the plane, obviously, out, hoping that it can get to her before she hits the ground. If she, does the sort of spread out thing that will stop her from falling as fast 10 seconds later, the people on the plane hear the grenade go off. They don't know whether or not Catwoman, or Selina Kyle, I guess at this point, was able to get the grenade away from her, toss it away, or if she was able to get the parachute. They don't know anything. And while Batman is sitting there just anguished with the thoughts, Darkwolf pulls out a gun and shoots him in the lower ribs. But because of his anguish over Catwoman, he wants vengeance, and he doesn't feel a thing when he puts the beat down on Darkwolf. He beats him down so good, he beats him down into the pilot cockpit door and busts it off its hinges and hits the pilot in the back of the head, knocking him out. The co-pilot has been tied to his chair the whole time, and the pilot's been the only one flying. Now no one is flying the plane, so the plane is now plummeting. It does a barrel roll. It's not a good time. Passengers are upside down. They're not having a fun time. Batman finally puts the final beat down. It says a last savage punch with nearly fatal force. Got it. That nearly is doing a lot of work there, because fatal force would make Batman a murderer. And we know. I guess we don't know. This is Earth 1 Batman. Earth 1 Batman, no murder. Earth 2 Batman, which is what's considered the Golden Age Batman, before the introduction of like Earth 1, Earth 2, this kind of thing. He's the one who loves to kill people. Earth 1 Batman, no kill. Earth 2 Batman, yes kill. So just before the plane is about to crash into the ground, Batman slides into the pilot's seat and pulls up good enough that it's a rough landing, but it is soft enough that everyone is okay. Darkwolf has been knocked out. He's got a new set of scars on his, or I guess claw marks on his face. They're not scars yet, from Catwoman ferociously clawing at him to go alongside Diablo's scars from earlier. Batman rushes out of the plane into the forest to try and find Catwoman. He is unsuccessful, because then we cut to the epilogue, which is interesting as well. Why that's a thing in this issue. Prologue and epilogue. To an hour before dawn, they are talking, or Batman and Robin are talking to Gordon and Vicky Vale and the other reporter. And Gordon is saying, nothing reported yet, Batman, but she went over very dense forest. We may never know. Batman then asks Gordon if he's taking care of the Panther. Gordon doesn't even know that they captured the Panther. And Batman says, never mind, Gordon. I'll take care of it alone. I owe her that much. Then Vicky Vale's reporter partner, who I have now been reminded is named Julia Remarque, with a Q-U-E at the end, says, without knowing anything about their past, I know what the last line of this story should be. I can feel it coming off him in hot waves, but it's a last line that will never be written. And someone asks, and what is that line, Julia? And she says, he loved her. And then it cuts to Batman standing over the body of Diablo, and sort of narration boxes. And just before dawn in Crime Alley, it is true. More true than Julia or anyone else could possibly know. He loved her. End. And we see sort of a ghostly image of Catwoman, that you see in sort of television and movies when someone's died. They look up in the sky and they sort of superimposed over the sky in a sort of transparent, translucent sort of image of someone you've just lost. And sad, Catwoman's dead. Oh no, Catwoman's dead now. Batman will never get to tell her he loves her, ever. And they'll never almost get married. But that's the end of Batman 382, which is weird because I clicked next, and the one it wants me to read next is Batman 381, which is confusing. But no, the next one will be 383, which is how comics go. The numbers get bigger. But yeah, that was certainly interesting. 1980s Batman is interesting. I was hoping for maybe a more traditional Batman story with maybe some rogues gallery to start with the first Batman story, but I mean, that's just the way it goes. That's the publishing order for you, you know? We get a one-off villain named Darkwolf, who is just a Syrian terrorist. That's his whole shtick. But let's move on. Let's move on, shall we? To Flash number 344. Released January 10th, 1985, with a cover date of April 1985. Only one debut in this one, since we have already met the Flash, the second Flash, Barry Allen, in last episode's Justice League of America. We are meeting for the first time on the podcast, but not his actual debut, Kid Flash, Wally West, Barry Allen's. I don't know if Barry and Iris are married at this point, but his nephew, eventually his nephew, if not already his nephew. Kid Flash, Wally West, Iris West's nephew. So let's get into the issue summary with the authors and all the sort of writing credits. We have writer Carrie Bates, penciler Carmine Infantino, who is the original artist for The Flash, so that's fun. Inker Frank McLaughlin, letterer David Cody Weiss, and colorist Carl Gafford. So let's get into this issue. And let's start with the cover. We have a close-up of the Flash with his hand on his face, and he's got a thought bubble that says, "After all these years, how could Kid Flash betray me in court?" And the background is all in black and white. And in the background, we have the adult Flash, Barry Allen, kind of putting his arm around Kid Flash back when Kid Flash had the exact same costume as the Flash. And in the sort of foreground, we have the now teenage Kid Flash, Wally West, in his new costume. With you'll know it if you've seen Young Justice. I was blanking on the name of the show, Young Justice, where the cowl, like the top half of the cowl is cut off so you can see his red hair, and it's yellow, but obviously this is in black and white, so you can't see that. And he's got his hand on a Bible, taking the oath, swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God, that kind of sort of situation, as he's being sworn in as a witness. And the title for this issue of The Flash is The Trial Continues. Now, this is the fifth part of a storyline called The Trial of the Flash, which is a multi-part story about the trial of the Flash after he has killed the Reverse Flash in issue 324, so about 20 issues before this. Not about, exactly 20 issues before this. And that is an event that took place during the wedding of Barry Allen to Fiona Webb, who would be his second wife if they had gotten married. People who have any familiarity with The Flash are probably wondering, well, that's crazy. Barry Allen is married to Iris West. True, but unfortunately in issue 275, exactly 69 issues before Flash 344, which is the one we're covering, obviously, Iris West was killed by the Reverse Flash at a masquerade party. Spoiler alert for anyone, for a 40-year-old comic book, probably older than that even. So he gets into a relationship and gets engaged and eventually to be married almost to Fiona Webb, a woman who is never talked about again, basically, after this killing of the Reverse Flash. So back to the trial. This is the fifth part. The previous four parts were weirdly not really about what was going on at the trial. There were some trial parts, but a lot of it was the Flash dealing with this villain that had been tricked into being a villain by the Flash's rogues gallery, villains like Captain Cold, Captain Boomerang. It's weird that there's multiple captains. Trickster, Weather Wizard. They tricked this guy into thinking that the Flash was his enemy, and they gave him this superpowered suit, and he was, causing a lot of problems for the Flash. And then Flash also had to deal with the fact that his lawyer believed that he was the main reason for her father, a police officer, being killed by a villain. and that was the storyline that took place the previous 2 issues to this one. So that's all fine and dandy, and things are going well, maybe, possibly, in this manslaughter. Actually, not manslaughter. It's been bumped up to second-degree murder, I believe, because the state is saying that the Flash did it on purpose, not on accident. So it's a new day of the trial, and there's rumors of a surprise secret witness for the state, and everyone's wondering what it is. The witness is brought in under, cloak, to not hide his identity, and at the end of issue 343, the one prior to this one, it's revealed to be Kid Flash. And you're like, why would the Kid Flash, testify against the Flash, Barry Allen, his good friend and mentor? We'll get into that in this issue, so let's start the issue itself. We have the first page is Barry sitting at the defendant's table, thinking to himself, I still can't believe it. I'm sitting here watching Kid Flash being sworn in as a witness for the prosecution. After all we've been through together over the years, how could Wally testify against me? His uncle, even though, his wife, Wally's aunt, is dead, he's still technically his uncle, I guess. His mentor, stuff like that. It feels like a betrayal. So we see Kid West getting, sworn in. He says, you solemnly swear to tell the truth. He says, I do. And the prosecutor, says, Kid Flash, former Teen Titan and superhero, now permanently retired. Wally West retired as Kid Flash in New Teen Titans number 39 in February of 1984, which was the beginning of the Judas Contract storyline, or near the beginning of it, that we talked about last episode, or maybe 2 episodes ago, in the Teen Titans issue. So he has been retired since then to focus on normal life and college and stuff like that. So he has come back as Kid Flash to testify, and so I hadn't really thought about it, but something that Barry's lawyer says right after Kid Flash is sworn in, she says, I'm sure the DA subpoenaed him, Flash, no matter how much Kid Flash hated showing up here today, he had no choice. Now, that made me wonder, how is Barry on trial in the first place as the Flash? The Flash is not a real identity. He would technically have to be on trial as Barry Allen. I'm sure maybe that was covered, why he'd be put on trial as his superhero identity, but that's not important. But how did the DA subpoena Kid Flash? Because, his identity isn't known to the public. So where did he send the subpoena? And if Wally West isn't running around as Kid Flash, how is a sort of service processor? Yeah, that's what they're called. The people who deliver subpoenas. It's like the ones where you've been served, that kind of things. How did they find him? That's a good question. It's not said. It's not said how he was subpoenaed, but he was subpoenaed. So we then go into a series of flashbacks. Barry, kind of reminiscing about the good old days when him and Barry, or him and, obviously he's Barry, him and Wally were partners in crime fighting. And we do get a series of flashbacks to legitimate issues of the Flash previously. So we get a origin story of Wally West, Kid Flash, from issue 110 of the Flash, which I'll just kind of, it'll be kind of like a little bit of a Silver Age edition of the podcast, I guess, for this one issue, because a lot of these take place in the Silver Age. So in issue 110, which we're getting a little, probably maybe a little summarized, maybe it's legitimately the entire thing, I don't know, but Wally West is visiting his Aunt Iris in Central City, and he's a big fan of the Flash. She brings him over to Barry Allen's apartment because Iris West knows that Barry Allen and the Flash are friends. She does not know that they are the same person. And Wally West is hoping to meet the Flash, and Barry says, "Yeah, Iris, that's fine. Just leave him here with me, and I'll contact the Flash and see if he can meet." And I mean, Iris has got to go to work at Picture News, so she's fine with that. So Barry does this thing that is so very, late Golden Age, very Silver Age thing, where he has to use his powers in just the most insane way. So he says that the Flash is in that room in Barry's apartment, uses it for a headquarters. And then as Wally is walking towards the office door, Barry shoots the costume out of his ring, because he has his ring where he keeps his costume, puts it on, runs to the door, opens the door, goes inside the office, and then closes the door, which there's got to be an easier way, because he says, "I moved so fast, he didn't even see the door opening and closing before he reached it. Here he comes." Now, I'm not a physicist, and obviously this is comic books, so they have their own rules of physics, because obviously the Flash can't exist in real life, but I just feel like no matter how fast you're opening a door, the door itself does not have super speed, because you still have to pull it. I just think, it would have been better. I actually think it would have been more impressive if Barry had ran outside, down all the stairs of his apartment, around to the other side of his apartment outside, up the wall, through the window, into the room. I think that would have been more impressive, or vibrating through the wall, but obviously that kind of stuff, I don't know if that was in the sort of comic book writers' Flash's tool book, if Carmine Infantino and the people who created Flash and were still working on it at 110 had that idea of something that Barry could do, but they do now. But I mean, if this is a shot by shot remake, obviously they can't be like, well, Barry did this instead. But so Wally is so very excited to meet the Flash, and he's like, I'm a really big fan. I can't wait till I tell all the cats back home. And Flash, being an old person in his, I'm assuming, late 20s or early 30s, is like, "What are cats?" And Molly's like, "Oh, you dang square. That means kids. My friends, my compatriots." After learning slang, Barry decides to tell Wally how he got his speed. He tells him about one fateful night, and he goes into Barry Allen's apartment. He has a laboratory in there because Barry Allen is a scientist, criminology scientist, a police scientist, if you want to call it that. And he tells Wally about the freak lightning bolt that crashed through his window and electrified chemicals, which were then spilled onto him, the Flash, Barry Allen, which then gave him super speed. And what should happen right as he says that? Another lightning bolt comes through the window, strikes chemicals, and they fall onto Wally West. And, the Flash is like, well, that's super weird. I wonder if it did the same thing, the same thing that happened to me 2 years ago. And so he decides to test Wally. To do that, he challenges Wally to a race, and obviously Wally's like, well, I'll never win. But they're running, and they're both running at basically the same speed. And the Flash, thinks, I'm not really holding back at all. And Wally's like, wow, that's weird. He must be holding back. So the Flash explains to Wally that Wally now has super speed. And, they do another test where Barry throws a ball, and Wally runs and catches it before it hits the wall. So he's got super speed, just like Barry. Barry then, using his super speed, makes Wally a costume, because, of course, Wally can't just go back to being a normal kid now that he's got super speed. He has to devote his life to crime fighting, even if he doesn't necessarily want to. Obviously, Wally wants to be just like the Flash, so being a superhero is awesome. And so Barry gives Wally a ring with his costume in it, and the costume, stupidly, looks just like the Flash. And so he calls him Kid Flash. He's a little mini-me. The Flash then has a thought bubble, which is sort of referring to himself in the third person, unless he does like a weird split personality where he says Barry Allen has to get back to work. Well, it's like, dude, you're Barry Allen. That's weird. That's like if I thought Nick needs to record a podcast or something like that. It's weird, but I guess it just helps everyone remember that Barry Allen is the Flash. The Flash speaking, not thinking inside his head, tells Wally that he's got to go for a while and for Wally to practice his speed until he masters it. While kind of hanging out in Barry's apartment, he overhears on the radio that some dangerous animals have escaped from the zoo, and he says, "Well, I'm like the Flash. I'm supposed to be a hero. I'm supposed to practice my speed too, so I might as well go deal with those dangerous animals." He does that. He runs across the city. He beats a super fast sports car. He helps an old man cross the street because there's so much traffic. And then he gets to the zoo and is going to deal with an escaped lion. And he does this by pushing the cage on wheels that the lion, or maybe some animal, was in, and then pushing it towards the lion and then pushing the lion into the cage at super speed. This is a part that I don't get about speedsters. Do they have some form of super strength? Because, think about it, he could push against or like run at this cage at super speed, but it is a non-moving object, and basic laws of physics, objects at rest tend to stay at rest until acted on by an outside force. That's fair. Kid Flash is the outside force, but I feel like that collision of an object sitting still and him would just crush his body. So, like, do they have a form of super speed? Not super speed, super strength, because otherwise I just don't understand. Or invulnerability, because otherwise I don't see how he doesn't bust all of his bones. And even if he wants to, say, not collide with it at rapid speeds, if he's at a dead stop and it's at a dead stop, what makes him stronger to move it? Because, like, I feel like just moving really fast doesn't necessarily mean you're causing more force onto something. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm understanding physics wrong. Like I said, not a physicist, but it just always confuses me. So he captures the lion. Good job, Barry. Sorry, Wally. Good job, Wally. He looks just like Barry. It's very confusing to me. And then he comes upon the bear, the other animal that has been let loose at this zoo, and he sort of does a tornado around it, causing air pressure to lift it up, and he sort of, tornado spins it into another cage, saving the day. Barry comes onto the scene, having heard about the escaped animals, and sees that Kid Flash has done it, and Barry then thinks, "I know now that I will never be alone again in my struggle against evil and injustice. I've got someone to fight at my side, Kid Flash, but I'd better not let him see me. I want to change back to Barry Allen." So he does. We then cut to later in the day, and this part is confusing because Iris says to Wally, "You say that you know who this amazing new Marvel Kid Flash is, but you can't tell me or Barry. Why even bring it up, Wally? I mean, I get you're a kid, but if you're going to be so, steadfast in saying, I can't tell you who it is because it's a secret forever between me and my friend Mr. Flash, why even bring up the fact that you know who Kid Flash is?" But it's a early Silver Age story, so logic doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. We then cut back to the courtroom very briefly while the Flash thinks about another memory that he had with the Reverse Flash. Not the Reverse Flash, oh my gosh. Kid Flash. The reason I thought that was because this is after Wally has gotten his new costume, which we'll also learn about how that happened in this issue. But this story that Barry is thinking of or reminiscing on is from issue of The Flash, issue 149. So several years ago, but about 40, 50, no, let's see, 110 is when Wally West came in, 149, so about 39 issues since Wally West has been the Flash. He's gotten his new costume in the meantime, like I said, which we'll learn about later. But he is investigating, or was investigating, a strange energy in Blue Valley where he lives with his parents, and it kind of transported him to this other planet where he learns about stuff that is going on there, and then he learns about a K-10 gang who are planning to blow up a bank. It's not super important what they're blowing up on this planet, but the important thing to know is that the explosion from this bomb will sort of shockwave through the, if you want to call it multiverse, if you want to call it whatever, and grow in power by doing that, and then it will explode at a much greater force than it did on this planet on Earth, probably destroying it, or destroying a large chunk of it. So Wally investigates this, and he attempts to catch the K-10 gang, but they shoot him with a laser. This is a highly technically advanced race that communicates by telepathy. Everybody has telepathy. Even Wally West has telepathy while he is on this planet. And so they shoot him with a laser, but it only grazes him on the head because he can't run as fast. Like, he was running just as fast as their vehicle, so they can easily see him and shoot him. And so they get away. Wally West then comes back, either running at a certain speed or, vibrating his body at a certain frequency, which is how the Flash travels through, universes, time, stuff like that. And Wally West goes back and tells Barry Allen all this, but as he is explaining this, Wally West collapses and wakes up a little bit later, or basically at that same moment, and has amnesia. He doesn't seem to remember who he is or who the Flash is or any of this stuff, and he doesn't remember how to get back to this planet, which is the important part. We then cut back to the courtroom for just a second, where we see the prosecuting attorney asking Wally West, I should say, sorry, on the witness stand, that the Flash had his super speed much longer than Wally West, so he would be more proficient in super speed than even Wally West. And Wally West answers yes. We then cut back to the Flash's memory, and Barry Allen, in an attempt to jog the Kid Flash's memory, takes him to some adventures or some places where they had many adventures. He talks about going to the land of golden giants in issue 120, very, very early in their tenure as a partnership. We then see a panel where it's explained that in issue 135 of The Flash, Wally West, it's such a weird way to give him a new costume. He gets a new costume. He gets the classic yellow on top, red pants, yellow boots, with the cowl, the half cowl that allows his hair to come out. And basically, what it boils down to is that Barry Allen, the Flash, was doing some experiments with this machine, and then he got loaded with all this energy, and Kid Flash ran up, and he got zapped by this energy, and it changed his costume from the one that looks just like the Flash's but smaller to the yellow and red one, primarily yellow one, that we see, or that most people think of when they think of Kid Flash. It's very silly, it's very Silver Age, but it's for the better because your sidekick shouldn't look just like you and smaller. It'd be really funny if Robin was just running around in a tiny bat suit. That'd be silly. And we called him Kid Batman or Kid Bat or something like that. Bat Kid, something dumb like that. But Kid Flash is kind of a stupid name. Anyways, Barry Allen, the Flash, takes Wally West to the doctor as Wally West to be like, hey, this guy, he's got amnesia. I found him. He's Wally West. Wally West's parents, come and get him, come pick him up, and they thank the Flash. And the Flash leaves the Wests, Wally West and his parents, watching TV, And as he's walking away from their house, he's thinking, they were watching TV. You know what? I've got to get to a TV studio fast. And what he does is Barry Allen goes to the TV studio and gets in front of the camera and takes off his mask, revealing that it is that he is Barry Allen, that the Flash is Barry Allen, which I got very confused when that happened, because I was like, well, wait, Barry Allen's identity is a secret, because otherwise he'd be on trial as Barry Allen, not as the Flash, which it'll get explained later. But Wally West, seeing this, shocks him so badly that his memory comes back to him. He then meets up with Barry. They travel to Ikora, whatever I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a made-up word for a made-up planet. They vibrate in such a way to get there. They then go and try to stop these bank robbers, these burglars who are trying to steal something with this. I explained it, the bomb that'll radiate out and explode our Earth. At first, they have some difficulty because everybody can read everybody else's minds, so the bank robbers know exactly what the Flash and Kid Flash are going to do. They thwart this, I should say, by keeping their minds perfectly blank, and then obviously they're super fast, so that's not a big deal. Pretty easy to handle. They capture the bank robbers, and then they return back to Earth, and then Barry explains that he didn't reveal his secret identity to the whole world. He did it so quickly, at super speed, that the only person who could have seen it is someone else with super speed. So I guess he's just hoping, because at this point in time, the Reverse Flash still exists, so I guess he's just hoping that the Reverse Flash wasn't watching the news or whatever, But Wally was the only one who could see it, so Wally's the only one that knows Barry Allen's secret identity. Because I don't know if at this time him and Iris are married, because this is a flashback from 149, so I don't know I can't remember what issue they got married in. But I don't think they're married. But she'll eventually learn his secret identity. But Wally West says that he'll keep the secret, and that this is one adventure he'll never forget. And everybody laughs. They go, oh, ho, 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 because he forgot, because he had amnesia. The Flash is then sort of kind of shaken out of his reverie by his lawyer, and she says, it looks like the prosecutor is ramping up, and it doesn't look like it's going to be good. It's going to be something very, very bad. So we cut to the prosecuting attorney, and he says, "Please, Kid Flash, would you repeat that last answer so that the entire court can hear you? The question was, in your opinion, as an expert on the subject of super speed, on the day in question, was it necessary for Flash to apprehend Reverse Flash? In order to apprehend Reverse Flash, he had to kill him?" And Wally West looks down. He looks very sad. I mean, he's had a tough go of it. He's retired. He didn't think he'd ever be back in costume. He just wanted to focus on his regular life. And he says solemnly, in all lowercase letters, so you can tell that he's like saying it very quietly. He says, no, it was not necessary to kill him. And then that's the end, and it kind of says, next, the secret face of the Flash. And we'll talk about that when we get to it in a while. But I guess really only in a month's time in publication history, but many issues in between. Because I think as a part of the trial, they're going to have to reveal Barry's identity. Because the cover, just a little sneak preview, the cover of the next issue has, I presume, his lawyer's hand pulling up the Flash's mask. It's like in the process of pulling up the Flash's mask. So, should be a good one. Should be exciting. But that was kind of a nice little refresher for people new to the book at the time, if you think about it, because 344, it's talking about issues from, issue 110, issue 149, talks about something that happened in issue 120, 135. It's a very much a refresher on why you should care, why it's a big deal that Kid Flash is being a witness at the Flash's trial, and not in support of him on the opposition side, because he was forced to. He was subpoenaed. So it kind of adds some weight to it. That is, I think, really good, and also refreshes you up on Kid Flash, even though he is, retired. So that will obviously, it won't last forever, because he eventually comes back. But yeah, so that is the Flash number 344, and that is the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I thought it was. I'm really enjoying doing these ones, and I enjoy the Golden Age ones too. But sometimes they get so silly that you need something maybe a little bit closer to what we now read. Something with more. And even these are kind of silly. The Wonder Woman one was quite silly, I thought. But remember to rate and review the podcast on iTunes and Spotify and wherever you can. So it helps spread the word. And if there's things that you don't like about the show, or some critiques you have, put those in the reviews. Or you can reach out to the show on Instagram and Twitter at, I believe it's Issue Podcast or Issue Pod on either of those platforms. There will be a link in the show notes, so or at least an actual spelling out of what it is in the show notes, so you can find it there. But until next time, I'll see you in just a few days on Monday for Issue by Issue Golden Age. But until then, see you around.